Here's Johnny.
We all know what that means, and it's not Johnny Carson. It is Jack Nicholson from The Shining because we are talking The Shining and Stanley Kubrick. This is Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from Los Angeles. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We are two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we cover a filmmaker who shaped our love of movies. Join us as we explore why they matter and review the three movies in the filmography that made the biggest impact on us. So, like you said, this is a big one. Probably the biggest one for you. I mean, as listeners might know from listening to the podcast, that Kubrick is a favorite director and arguably probably one of the genius minds that's ever existed. So, yeah, excited to get into this. But why don't you start us off with what is your relationship with Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, so he is my favorite director, and I'm really looking forward to diving in this episode just to honor The Shining's 45th anniversary this year. It opened in May of 1980, so we're going to get into The Shining and then get into Kubrick. But yeah, for me, it was very quickly when I was a teenager and starting to really to get into film beyond just being obsessed with Star Wars and Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and those big 80s films. It was seeing Clockwork Orange for the first time and just immediately being like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. This is like the most interesting thing I've ever seen, and wanting to immediately learn as much as I can about the director and then the film. So like Kubrick, immediately I was drawn to him. Watched a lot of his older films when I was a teenager. Loved every single one of them. He was the first director that I actually bought books for and to analyze the movie. So I was immediately going to the library. I'm like, okay, I want to know everything I can about not only him, but more importantly, like the like critical studies analysis of his different movies to understand like what they're about, because his movies are very very dense and very layered, and to me they reward a lot on repeat viewing because there are so many things that he's doing in the movie to tie back to these themes that he has. So that, for me, he's always been important, and now I definitely consider him my favorite director, and one of the directors where he's had for me like four or five, or maybe even more than that, now that I'm trying to count, like sort of 10 out of 10 masterpiece films. He has more than any other director, especially in terms of his output, which wasn't huge. Like he did not make a ton of films like a Spielberg or even a Hitchcock, who has, tens of, dozens of films. He didn't make a lot, but the ones that he made are just amazing. And every time I watch them, it's like new things get, revealed to me. Even on these watches for this episode, I broke out my Taschen, that giant sort of coffee table book of his, reading all the different things, watching the movies. Like I really get into it as an intellectual exercise, which I really enjoy. So yeah, he is, yeah, the number one for me still. What about you? What is your thoughts on Kubrick and his films
Yeah.
overall?
I mean, I came to him pretty late, and we'll talk about sort of first love and such. And but obviously, even in conversation with you when we were just getting to be friends, like I remember us talking about, what is our definition of great movies and great filmmakers, and yours, as I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, was all about sort of image making, right?
Hmm.
And the look and the feel and all of that. Versus for me, it was more. I mean, that was important, but it was more about characters and interactions, relationships, and things like that. So it's taken, we just approached things, from different angles. So for me, for a long time, Kubrick was sort of in that bucket, A, because I had not watched all of his stuff.
Hmm.
B, this is the conversation that I always remember that I had with you, that, oh, this is the quintessential, image making filmmaker. And that's true, obviously. I mean, his compositions and the mise en scène, as we talk about every department working in harmony to create these everlasting images, that's always been there. And I will say that I also avoided some of going deeper into his filmography because the discourse, the film bro, film Twitter discourse on him is just so deep that I just, even though, I mean, hell, what we are probably film bros to people because we're doing this thing
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we
yeah.
love it. So I guess we are, but I don't know. I have like an aversion for that, or people going on big tangents and random opinions and hours and hours. I immediately tune out. So I avoided a lot of that because I don't want to deal with this. So
Hmm.
this podcast and preparing for this was actually I was intimidated, also sort of, a little bit questioning myself that, oh, how is this going to be? But ultimately, it ended up being such a rewarding experience of just like, and of course, who am I kidding? Like, this is one of the best directors that's ever lived. And I guess I can go into what surprised me and what I kind of got from this whole viewing experience. I still
Yeah,
haven't seen everything that he's done, but I've seen a lot now. And of course, it's not about just the image making and the dense ideas and the amazing preparation, but it's also brilliant performances, stories, and interactions, and brilliant commentary on humanity, even though it might be nihilistic and it might be exploring the darker sides of humanity, but it's all there. And of course, there are Easter eggs and, like you said, theories and such that you can keep coming back to. But these are like you said, they're masterpieces. Nobody has that, It's almost like when Kubrick comes and says, "Oh, I'm going to make the war movie, or I'm going to make the period movie, or I'm going to make the romance period, whatever movie," and then he sort of nails it and says, "Okay, this is the best version." Obviously, space movie, right? Like nobody
right.
can top that. So, I mean, there's no one else who can say that, who's played in so many different genres and yet made movies that are quintessentially his in terms of style and image making and his ideology. It's all there, and just like the deep preparation that goes into. I've been reading about him too, and watching documentaries on him, and these movies, you can't shake them. They just have such an everlasting impact. But also they were very entertaining. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's not like, oh, this is homework, because I sort of thought of it as homework, that, oh, this is going to be really dense and big ideas and slow moving things that look pretty and beautiful, but I'm not going to enjoy them. I'm not going to love them. Not true. It was, so anyway, this is not a hot take. Kubrick is pretty
It,
good.
yeah, no, he definitely is, and yeah, it's interesting. Like, I've thought about a lot too, more so with preparation for this episode too, of like maybe why, other than the obvious of these great films, like why I kind of gravitated so quickly to him. And I feel that, a lot of the criticism of his movies are, they're cold or they're not human or very distant from, the human experience. And I had never interpreted him like that. And I feel that what he does is he brings in emotion, but through like this intellectual exercise. So
Right.
you have to like think before you feel with his movies, and that has honestly had a little more about my personality anyway. He's not really wearing his heart on his sleeve. You have
No.
to like think about it, and then it's like I think some of the most moving performances, especially. But these movies are, like you said, about humanity and the human experience more so than other movies that I think are trying to do that directly, like make you feel about these characters and things. Like no, 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 you have to like think about it and you're like, whoa, this is about, what it means to be alive. What is violence?
Mm-hmm.
What is love?
Mm-hmm.
What are all, it's like the biggest questions that we face as a
Yeah.
race. He tackles them, but first from like a philosophical perspective. And then, the heart is there, but it's not as obvious. And I think maybe that's just because he is so particular and obsessive about every single thing, which is also what I love about him too. Like, that every shot, every uh, piece of the set he's thought about, and it's there for a
It's
reason.
purposeful.
It's
Yeah.
purposeful, and that makes it very cool because then, I might watch a movie, and the one time I watch, Eyes Wide Shut, I'm only going to focus on the color and how he uses color. Just watch it for that, and you see all the stuff open up for you. Or maybe I'm going to watch 2001 and really just focus on the music and how he uses that and
Right.
not anything else, or how he uses shapes and things in Clockwork Orange, and it's just like you can hit it from all these different angles because you know that he spent the time. And I don't mean the conspiracy theory stuff around The Shining about
Right.
faking the moon landing. Like that stuff is fun and silly, but I mean, like he didn't. I don't believe he put that stuff in there, and I do believe the moon landing happened and all that stuff. But it's fun that there are those aspects of it too. But that's not why I love going back
Right.
to The Shining, because of all these other things that are in there, and we'll get more into The Shining in a bit. But yeah, it's like to me that is what makes him interesting. And I do
Yeah.
think, to your point, his performances, he's gotten out of some of these actors iconic. Some of the best,
That-
performances of on screen, the memorable
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that he's able to get out of them. So I think his reputation is a little unfair about being a cold filmmaker, at least to me. I find him the exact opposite.
I think so. And I think a lot of it has to do with the discourse that's, come up with all these theories and the kind of obsessiveness that comes at, so it just sort of adds to that. And it's easy to sort of forget about the depth and the other side of the human side of it, but it's all there. I guess two other things I would say, which is that a lot of the movies that I watched of his, especially for the first time, I couldn't believe that they were made in the year they were made in.
Hmm.
I mean, it's sort of astounding to me that A, they just feel timeless. They could have been made any time, and some of that has to do with just the technical brilliance. But also, in saying so, I feel like they were also probably very ahead of their time when they were made. I mean, I was thinking about the decade some of these movies came in, and then comparing the other movies that were playing that year or even in that decade, and then smack down in the middle, there's this thing
Hmm.
which feels and looks nothing like any of the movies that were being made then, which is great for us, obviously, that we can keep going back to them and they're timeless and evergreen. But yeah, it must have been such a shock to the system when these movies came out, and no wonder some of them didn't do well or weren't appreciated or were rejected or didn't win Oscars or what have you, right? Because it was hard for people to kind of wrap their head around. So that's one kind of incredible thing.
Absolutely.
And then I guess the other thing which I mentioned earlier, which is that some of these movies that he's made, they are the absolute best of that kind of movie. Like the best war
Hmm.
film, the best space movie, maybe one of the best period dramas. Like how many people can say that? It's absolutely incredible.
Right, you can't pin him down to a specific genre. Hitchcock, who we
No,
covered, and he's
never
my
made the
second
same
favorite
movie.
director, right? Like
Yeah.
Hitch is amazing, but he stays in this lane. He does it very well. I mean, every time he try to go outside of it, do comedy, it wouldn't really work, but he's very good at thrillers and mysteries. Kubrick can hit, like you said, anything and just delivers the goods immediately. And it isn't, and also they don't feel like genre pictures either. Like The Shining, which we'll get into, yes, it's a horror movie, and yes, he's playing with those tropes a little bit, but it doesn't feel like just a horror movie. It's a Stanley Kubrick movie. It's,
Right.
this exploration of the internal, like, psychological drama of this character. And so he's playing in genres, but then removing those tropes and just doing his own thing. And I think that also is what good art is, really, right? Like
Right.
it, you listen to like Beethoven's Ninth, and it sounds fresh and modern and great, and not like this old thing. And the same way you watch, Paths of Glory or Doctor Strangelove, it doesn't feel of its time. It feels timeless. And
Yeah.
all of his movies, at least except for one, which was my wild card that we'll get into, do feel timeless and do not feel like you can peg them into any era, which is
No,
just
exactly.
fantastic.
No, but the connecting thread is the darker side of humanity, and what are our vices? How do we end up ruining our own existence, even though we might be starting with good intentions, and how people get corrupted and the systems we build, how those systems then take us down. Like those themes are always there,
Right,
pretty much. That's the
right.
connecting thread, and people might sort of on the surface feel that, oh, this isn't that genre or that genre, like you said, but it's actually not about the genre. It's about these deeper themes, and it's always a book adaptation. Like he gets obsessed
Hmm.
with a certain book that appeals to him and appeals to him because of these themes, and then it seems to me that he takes on the challenge of like, okay, I'm going to then go fully deep in recreating this whole experience with that central theme, but then also take on this challenge of kind of entering this totally different world, which I've never done before.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, no, it's the older I've gotten too, while I do agree that a lot of the themes are dark, and he does get into these like very heady, the $1 million questions that we have as humans. But I think some of his films actually could be seen as a little more optimistic, at least in how they end, than it might, or at least I interpreted
Yeah.
as a kid. And there is also a sense that I've realized as I've gotten older too and watching this, also how funny they are. And he
Oh,
has this
for sure.
very dark satirical sense of humor that even in something as like The Shining, which is a very, serious film and a lot of horrible things happen in it, there's still moments that are just very funny, and he can kind of like
Totally.
find the right time, which is just also I think goes against a little bit of his reputation of this really serious filmmaker. It's like, no, actually, like The Clockwork Orange is one of the funniest movies to me, and even though it's about some really really dark stuff, but the
Right.
way that he's able to weave that is just is so
It's pretty
impressive.
dark sense of humor, but it's
Yeah.
always there. which is funny because for the longest time I thought he was not American. I thought he was British or
I,
European
yeah,
because his
honestly, I
sense
did
of
too.
humor is
Yeah.
like that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I always thought because when in the 90s we lived in Britain, he left America and
Right.
didn't come back and doesn't like to be on airplanes, so he never kind of traveled. And I just assumed he was this English director when I was first getting into him. I was like, wait, he's from like the Bronx? Like he's like a New York kid. But yeah, it is funny. He has more European sensibilities. I think he does not feel like
Definitely.
an American filmmaker at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just
All
just
right.
just incredible. So let's then jump into The Shining. So this is a movie that came out end of May of 1980. And the IMDb plot summary: a family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter, where a sinister presence influences the father into violence. At the same time, his psychic son sees horrifying forebodings from both the past and the future. So obviously directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. Oh, and Scatman Crothers. He's awesome.
Mm.
So I'll start just with my thoughts, more on like the Kubrick angle of this, and then we can get into the wider film. So I had seen this is one of the early films I had seen of his. Both of my sisters, like I mentioned on the podcast before, were obsessed with horror movies, so they would always be watching all the greatest horror movies. Sometimes that was the first time I'd see it. Was they would be like, "Oh, we have to rent this," and this is a movie that I watched a lot as a kid, mainly because they also liked it. But one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So I've seen this so many different times over the course of my life. And what I think this movie is so excellent in doing is we'll talk a little about like Kubrick's mise en scène a lot in this, but it's still terrifying to me. Like even just hearing the opening theme and seeing those opening shots, I'm immediately unsettled. And throughout the entire movie, I know what's going to happen, but it still just horrifies me. And it's the way that his camera works, where it's almost like in the hotel when he's following Jack Nicholson or really like Danny, who's the young kid around. It feels like the hotel is watching them, and there's something
Mm.
else, some other evil presence that's there because you're a little bit detached, and it's these weird camera angles where it's like not a human and you're not really the audience. It feels like you're watching them through this evil point of view, and it's still just so creepy. Like those tracking shots when Danny's on his little scooter and you hear like the sound of him going on the carpet and then on the wood floor and then on the carpet. It's something about it. It's just very creepy and unsettling. And a lot of it, I think, has to do, for me at least, with that the way that he uses the camera in this movie is just super super creepy. And also in terms of the themes, it is, I think, all about character, really, this movie, because
Hmm.
it is a character in Jack Nicholson who is a troubled guy, had an issue with alcoholism, accidentally hurt his kid. He's dealing with these inner traumas, and then the house and the evil there sort of like opens that up. So it's not possessing him, it is not taking him over. These are just the dark sides of him that just become unleashed, and he lashes out and attacks his family. But it's sort of, is that always was that always there? How do you deal with your own inner demons? Like that to me is what this movie's about. So yes, there's obviously supernatural elements in it, but to me it's more about that human story and the struggle that Jack Nicholson's character goes through and succumbs to in the end. Like he could not face he faced his demons, and the demons inside of him won. Is sort of how I see this film. So yeah, we'll talk more about
Yeah.
the film too, but those are the elements of the Kubrick stuff that I like in this movie a lot. What about you? When did you first see The Shining, and what did you think of it?
Last week. Never
Oh,
seen it
nice.
before. As
Oh,
you know, I'm
wow.
not a big horror person, and obviously I hadn't watched a lot of Kubrick's movies. So this
Mhm.
was, this is like one of those memeified movies, right? Like maybe this is the most memeified movies of Kubrick's, probably. Like, the twins and,
Mhm.
the blood gushing out of the doorways and all of Jack Nicholson's, things and what have you. So but yeah, I mean, from the very beginning, the tracking shot of kind of, the windy road going to the hotel, which is absolutely mesmerizing and beautiful, and the score and all of the departments coming together, like you said, you're sort of in for a ride, right
Mhm.
at the jump, and that sort of carries on. And I agree with you, like you were saying earlier, that yes, there are jump scares and what have you, like a horror movie, but I mean, now we talk about these elevated horror movies, right? Like that have more on their mind. And I know this just from reading about movies and such, that they all are taking a page out of this book, right? Where this is so much more about character and who we are as people, the demons we carry, how we are tortured. And also, to add to the themes, like there's a little bit of writer's block, writer's dilemma, the struggles of a creative person.
Hmm.
There's that angle involved here as well. Like he's trying to write and he's probably a hack, a horrible writer. One of the biggest revealing moments is that those four words written
Right.
over and over and over again, which you can argue, is it a possession thing or is it just that he's just bad, and trying to figure out and get out of this thing. And then also, which you'll get to a little bit more and talk about the movie, that I think it's also a redemption story of somebody who, on the face of it, is weak
Hmm.
and might be rejected by society in Shelley Duvall's character, who ends up defeating this thing. And you see that as you pay close attention. And I know there are a lot of horrific stories of her experience and what have you, making this movie of such a hard taskmaster Kubrick is, which by the way is my other read, that there's always a control freak crazy person in all the movies, pretty
Exactly. Yeah.
much,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is maybe an alter ego of his, who knows.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a redemption story as well, and from her point of view. And this is not your typical, victim person in a horror movie who's just screaming and yelling and being slashed. You really see her confusion and picking herself back up, and it's heightened, but it's also very grounded at the same time, and that's the genius of Kubrick, I think, from all the camera work and the set design, but also in the performances, that it is pitched high, but it's also very grounded at the same time. I don't know how he's able to do this. It's
Hmm.
absolutely genius.
Yeah, especially with Jack Nicholson, who is the most Jack in a
Yeah,
movie, at least up until this point, and it works for this. Like you don't feel it's an over-the-top performance. There is subtlety in his transformation, and again, you can tell that it's him struggling with himself. And even when he's talking to these ghosts, it's like, is he really just talking to the ghosts inside of him, and
right,
how he's dealing with his own shame of hurting his son and pain that he feels about that. And then obviously the alcoholism piece of it is woven in this movie too, where the house is giving him drinks right all the time. And is it
right,
is it real alcohol? But they're ghosts, but they're not real. But then at one point they do let him out of a trapped room. So there's all that piece of it too, which I think is really fun. And actually, I think this movie and some of the other Kubrick films, but this is definitely one of them too, that I remember as a kid when I was watching this, or as a teenager, I didn't really understand like a lot of what was going on with they'd cut to into these random images from the past, and like the plot
mm,
isn't is kind of hard to follow. At least I mean, I've seen it so many times now, so I kind of know what to get, but at least I felt as a kid it was a little hard to understand kind of what was going on. There's just a lot of stuff thrown at you, but it was more of like a vibes horror movie in that sense. But
yeah.
even though I didn't understand why there's like room 287 and what really was going on, and what Danny's, does he have powers, what is this, as a kid at least I was confused by that stuff, but it still was incredibly scary because of like the vibe and how it he constructs these scenes, the use of the music, especially the use of the camera to me. And yeah, I still find it, I was found it scary, and I loved it even though I didn't really understand exactly what was going on. I mean, now you're an adult man. I don't know if you had that issue when you watched it last week, but as a kid, I was always like, "What is this?" And I think that's another reason why there's so many theories that were
Mm,
being made around this movie, weird sort of
mm,
conspiracy theories, because it's like, what is actually happening here? And I know Stephen King really didn't like this
right.
adaptation either, because he removed a lot of things and made things too ambiguous from what King wanted. I don't know. I think that adds to the allure of this, and that you can't really figure out his Kubrick's movies. I think is fun, and this, at least as a kid for me, was one of those.
I bet, I mean, I got it, but I still spent like hours after that, like reading and, listening to other people talk about it, just to, I mean, such a rich experience kind of, entering the world of any of his movies, but especially this one, I think, because it
Hmm.
has such a ominous quality to it. It could be anything actually. And the real dread, to me, I think comes from that place. It's not in the jump scares, it's not in sort of the violence and all of that. It's more about, oh, what is this, you from the inside or is it the outside? And then all these flashbacks to the old world, these sort of 1920s grand parties and what have you, like
Hmm.
it's opulent, but also it's scary, it's ominous, but at the same time, there's something deeper here because they symbolize a very dark core of who we've been as people and maybe even continue to be and will always be in some way, right? So, what could be scarier than that, right? Like, That whole thing of like, yeah, I corrected her.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah.
Like what could be scarier than that? What do you mean? What did you do?
Hmm.
So and then of course it's happening in these amazing settings which are so beautiful and opulent. But to me, that stuff is actually that sticks with you, that you think about for days and days after the movie's over, not so much the jump scares.
Right. Oh, yeah. And the production design of this movie is just absolutely incredible. The fact that the
Amazing.
hotel interiors were all built on a set and constructed, like they're none of that is real. The outsides are real. Actually,
Right.
it's Mount Hood in Oregon. I've been there twice to
Oh,
the
wow.
exterior plate, and it was like really cool going up there. And it is kind of like, oh wow, that's the house or that, sorry, the hotel, and
Yeah.
it feels kind of creepy like that. But yeah, it's like I love the production design of this movie. It's so incredible. I actually have my mouse pad is the pattern of the rug from the Shining rug. I have a lot of Kubrick merch actually. I should mention too. He's one of the few directors where I like as a high school college student, I had a poster of from The Shining of Jack Nicholson holding the axe like going through the maze. It's like this really creepy photo of it. It's just like shining on it. I went to the Mount Hood exterior place, and then again I have the mouse pad. It's like I don't know, Kubrick still too. I mean, maybe this is getting back to more just him in general, but he still resonates in the culture so much. Actually, this
Mm,
movie reminds me of the first kind of fake trailer trend that started on
mm.
YouTube maybe like 15 years ago, where they re-edit trailers to make it look like something different. I don't know if you've seen this, but someone put together a a trailer edit of The Shining to make it look like a feel-good drama between like a writer who's had writer's block and a kid who's searching for a
Oh,
dad.
I haven't
It
seen
was
that.
it's one of like the first fake trailer things. So again, Kubrick still resonates in society. The movie came out 20 years before that,
Oh,
but he
no.
still is in the pop culture. Just incredible. One of the
Totally.
few directors that can still do that.
Totally. And for filmmakers too, right? You hear Jordan Peele, you hear Oz Perkins, who did Long Legs last year. Like all of these movies, they're paying homage to this. So
Hmm.
it's very clear, and the influence is very clear in pop culture, but also for filmmakers. No, I'm so glad that I finally watched this masterpiece, and it was amazing. I will say some of the imagery of the twins and the blood, because I've seen it so much, outside the movie, that I just kept thinking of, oh, if I didn't know about those things, those
Hmm.
images would be so much more impactful, because that's just not how I encountered them.
Right,
So that
right.
sort of took away from it. And then, Jack's persona now lives out loud in my head. So it did take me out, even though it very much works, like you said, and it's in the movie, but it did take me out because, like, oh, this is just Jack being Jack a little
Right,
bit.
right.
Uh, but I think the surprise to me was her. Like, I think
Mm.
she is absolutely incredible in this movie. Such a hard physical performance to give and emote. The confusion, like when he's yelling at her, when she interrupts him, when he's writing
Oh
within
yeah,
quotes, like
right.
all that confusion on her face, and then the dread and the scare, but also have to protect myself and the child. Like, I think it's one of the most hardest daring performances I've seen. And that too from somebody who's not quote unquote badass. Like we love doing this in movies. Here's like a weaker character who's suddenly now badass. No, it feels very real and grounded, like somebody who you would reject and wouldn't give them enough credit that actually that, oh, they can actually pull this off. But guess what, they have that in them and they're able to do that. And she kind of walks that tightrope so beautifully. And yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. I think she has such a good scared face. Like when she screams and is terrified, it makes me like terrified too. And I think
totally.
she is definitely an unsung hero in this film in terms of like her acting performance, but also just sort of what I think it's saying, right? This is obviously a very toxic relationship that they
Right.
were not even before the house, they had problems or the hotel. And in when you're in a toxic relationship, you can't defeat the other person. You have to just leave them. And she doesn't try to, kill Jack Nicholson at the end. He just gets caught up in his own toxicity and issues and just
Right.
dies himself. Her job is just to, protect her child and leave, which is
Right.
what you do in a relationship. You can't fix the other person. At some point, it crosses some line where you just have to get out of there. So I like that this movie doesn't give more of Another type of ending, which I mean, I know this might have been the book too, but ending where the heroine then kills the bad guy and like she's victorious because she's defeated him. It's like no, actually, she just needs to do what she needs to do, which is get out of
It
there.
feels
And
more
Jack,
real,
it
actually.
totally feels real and fits more with the commentary, I think, of what this
Yeah,
movie is about, which is again a toxic relationship, and then how you're with someone who is struggling with these demons, and you can't really help them. They have to help themselves, and if they're not going to help themselves, then they'll end up, dying in a
yeah,
hedge maze while you save your own kid and get out of there. Which I really I just love too the ending of this movie, and I think
so
Kubrick
good.
is one of the best directors when it comes to just iconic endings. Every single one of his movies just ends on
Totally.
such an incredible note, and
Oh,
this just with that flash cut to him dead. And then that amazing sort of like zoom in on the him in the painting, and just the movie just ends. There's no the last time you see her, she's in that snowmobile just leaving. There's not some big hero shot of we made it, Danny. We're safe. We're free. That's just it's boom. It just ends. It's
it just
so
ends, and then, there's a bookend on this story, but what the flashback does is that, oh, this has been going on, or
right.
will this keep going on? And when does this, or maybe the cycle of evil has ended? Like it sort of peppers you with all of these, questions which you stay with. And that's why this movie, I mean, it's just is absolutely incredible.
So
Uh,
good.
one last thing about Shelley Duvall, like she has such a face and just her like physical presence is just so perfect for this movie because it's so odd and
Hmm.
weird, which I think is just so perfect, you know? Like from the very beginning, you're sort of like, oh, how are you two even together? Like, how did this happen? You
Right.
know? There's
Yeah.
something odd here from the very beginning. So yeah, so good.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic film. So that was The Shining. Now we're going to move on to our top three. So what we do in every episode here is you talk about three movies that really resonated us when it comes to, in this case, Stanley Kubrick. So first, when it comes to our first loves, this is the first Stanley Kubrick movie that we remember loving and what made us fall in love with him. Then we're going to go to our masterpiece, which we personally think is our favorite film. Stanley Kubrick's one that resonates with us the most. And then finally, the wild card. This will be anything we want to bring in. Maybe a film that is not as celebrated that should be, or a wild swing that Kubrick made that didn't work, or a wild swing that did. So those are the
Mhm.
top threes. And why don't I start actually, Karan, and get into with my first love, which is a film we've covered on the podcast before, but it is a Clockwork Orange from the year 1971. So the IMDb plot summary: Alex the Large and his droogs barbarize a decaying near future. Very short and to the point there. Directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Malcolm McDowell, and just an incredible performance for him. So I'll start off on again. I kind of mentioned already. This was the first movie that I
Mhm.
saw of his, and there was already this sense. I was probably like 12 or 13, I think, when I saw this, and this movie
We saw
was
it way too young.
okay. I'll tell that to my parents. I think actually maybe my dad who was like, "You should watch this." I think I can't recall exactly, but it's a movie that was already like I had heard about, and it had this dangerous kind of allure to it. It was banned in England for decades, rated kind of NC-17 or X or unrated in the United States because of what it was. And when you're a teenager, those things are very alluring. Like, oh, cool! Like I get to watch something that is forbidden even by adults. Like people in England can't even watch this. So it had already had this coolness factor to it, and then immediately I was just swept up in again just like the I'll keep using the word cool, but there is something just sort of like cool and kind of punkish about the vibe of this movie,
Hmm.
and Alex, the main character, even though obviously he does horrible things, but in a way where there is a sense of like coolness and kind of like badassness to this. So I immediately was just sort of like drawn in by this, and with the beauty of the movie too, and this juxtaposition that it has around contradictions of like high art with Alex's love of Beethoven, with his violence, and the fact that him and his gang, they sort of dress in these dapper little hats and canes like they're from high society, and yet they commit violent acts and rapes and things in those costumes. So that contradiction I was immediately caught onto. I thought also was very cool, and a great exploration of just the contradictions in society, and how especially violence there is some interesting allure and contradiction in that. And so, yeah, I'll get more into the film, but it immediately just like I think again, it was the allure of it and the construction of how beautiful the movie looked that I was like, who is this director? Like I'd heard of
Mm.
Kubrick, but now I have to go out and rent all these books in the library to read about him. And this film for a while was my favorite movie of all time for about 5 or 6 years. Now it's no longer not even my favorite Kubrick film, but it's at least in my top 10 or top five mo favorite movies of all time, and I love coming back to this and watching it. So yeah, what are your thoughts on maybe on this rewatch? I think this is the second
Yeah.
time you've seen it. As the first time was our previous episode, I
I
think.
think I seen it one time before and
Okay,
then
okay.
saw it for the podcast when we covered this movie. And yeah, I mean, the imagery and the music of this movie is something that I was aware of even before, like the Beethoven soundtrack and
Hmm.
the milk and the white and the eyelashes and all of those images. I mean, Kubrick, as we said, is such a great image maker. Um, but yeah, I think when I saw it the last time, just given that's the thing with great movies, right? That your state of mind and you it sort of challenges and you bring that to a movie anyway, right? But Kubrick's
Hmm.
movie sort of challenge that wherever you are in your life and whatever is it that you're dealing with. And I think the last time I watched it, I mean, you obviously admire the brilliance of it, right, in all areas, but it's also a very hard watch. Like it felt so wild to me that oh my gosh, like this is crazy, but at the same time it stuck with me of like no, these contradictions are there obviously, right? But it's sort of dialed up and heightened to such a high degree that it's a hard watch. And I think this time, because I maybe had seen it now twice and fairly recently, like some of the shock factor and the violence of it was maybe a little bit tempered. And so now you could sort of engage with it more and think about it more cerebrally, in
Hmm.
terms of contradictions and of life. And also not so much the coolness of the guy because he's pretty repulsive, but it's more of the patheticness of it, like
Hmm.
you sort of start to almost feel a little bit bad for him. Not that he deserves it, but it's sort of more like, oh, look what's happened, Look what's happened to him. Look what's happened to us as a society. And so it made me sort of, yeah, it's a wild roller coaster ride from excitement to kind of deep sadness, and they both play at all times pretty much. Even when he's doing exciting things, because they are often so bad that there is sadness from the point of view of the victim. So it's a very deep, odd movie, and also what time period is it in? That's the other thing that I keep thinking
Right.
about, which again, like I was saying earlier, makes this movie totally timeless because it could be any time, it doesn't matter. But I mean, you could almost watch this movie, like you were saying, with eyes wide shut, just for the production design,
Oh
or
yeah.
just for the music and how every image is constructed, or just for his performance. Like there's just so many layers in this movie, but they all come together and they create this symphony of dread and sadness and excitement. So there's nothing like it. I don't think there's any other movie like it, actually. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's super unique, and I think
Yeah.
that is what captivated me so much when I saw it as a kid. Which, again, like now as older, the violence piece of it feels more serious, I guess, than when you're younger. It's sort of that is kind of there's again a coolness and allure to
Mm,
people kind of being bad in that way, and then the redemption arc that he kind of goes through, which I think is very interesting as well in this film, which is based on a book. So, the book deals with this as well too, in very similar ways. But these themes of, punishment versus forgiveness and choice being such an important thing. You choose to be good. If you're being forced to be good, then you're not a human at that point, which is, I think, the brilliant part about this entire story actually, which is what it's trying to say. Like, yes, Alex and his gang does horrible things, but then the government, are they doing worse things by the torture that they do to him and taking away his free will? Is that worse, or is that justified because of what Alex is doing? Which is definitely, the movie is not saying what he's doing is right. But you do start feeling bad for him in that sequence when
hmm
he comes back and his parents kick him out and his friends beat him up and he can't fight back because he has no more free will, and they ruin his love of Beethoven. You do feel bad for him, and it's like, is this right? Like, is there some
Yeah.
forgiveness that we can give him and redeem him instead of force him to be good? And I think there's one of the chaplains, I think, in the prison says that at some point, like, you're taking away all the free will. This is not, someone should ask for forgiveness and then work towards it instead of just being given that forgiveness by the state, by taking away their free will to make the right decisions. So that
Yeah.
that little intellectual exercise I always think is very fascinating. The more times I see this movie, the more I think about it from that respect too.
Totally. Totally.
And two, I mean, I think it's very funny. Like I said earlier, I think
Oh
this
yeah.
movie, just from the immediate outset, I mean, I love the dialogue, like the little slang terms they use, and Alex is the narrator, and the way he kind of narrates, where he's calling himself the humble narrator, and like, oh no, look at me now, and it's like there is something silly about that, and the way that he describes the horrible things that he does. I just find this movie to be one of his Kubrick's funniest movies, and obviously there's some very obvious comedic scenes when the his counselor drinks the denture fluid, or I love the
Right.
prison guard guy who's like yelling at him and just acting like all sort of the British officer kind of stuff. I think that is just so funny. And two, I think the movie in a way is very optimistic in the end, where he
Mm-hmm.
does get they tried to cure him, but then the human spirit breaks through and he says, yeah, I was cured because he's still having violent and sexual thoughts, which means he's free. And the state's plan didn't work, even though we wish he didn't have those horrible thoughts. But
Right.
having them in and of itself is human. I think you have to embrace the negative sides of humanity as well, and just control them. Obviously, I'm not saying this movie
Right.
condones the violence, but it's just I love how the story makes you sort of feel good that he's now bad again, or at least that's how I feel at the end. It's like nice, he's
Yeah.
saved. Like humans can continue to be terrible too, because that's just part of what
Yeah.
it means to be alive.
No, it's playing with your allegiances throughout, right? Who's bad, who's not bad, and I guess a more darker point of view is that everyone's sort of bad, in their own way.
Hmm.
And I agree, you do feel bad. It's a complicated ending to me, right? Like you
Hmm.
do feel good, quote unquote, about the spirit of humanity and being free, that, people can change you. At the same time, you also feel bad and sad that this is how you're going to lead the rest of your life,
Right.
and how many other people you're going to cause damage to. And should you be living? Should you
Hmm.
be let loose? Probably not. And then you're going to go through the same cycle all over again, probably, because you're going to go out and do bad things. And that's why, your views might vary on what, degree of punishment should be there or no. But the truth is that there are bad elements in society, and
Right.
something has to happen. But I think the more deeper meaning is that there are bad elements in all of us,
Hmm.
and should they be let free? Should they be controlled? Who controls them? Is it you who should be controlling? Are there other ways to drive awareness, or what? And these are hard questions. There are no real answers to them in my mind, other than just this is what it is. And yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a good point. In this movie and a lot of Kubrick's movies, I do think raise a lot of these questions, but he
they
doesn't
don't answer
always
them.
try to answer them all or answer them
No,
in a very specific way. So, well, here's some possible answers to this. And that is what I love about his film so much too, where he's not taking a stand, being very preachy and direct on like,
right.
no, violence is bad and this is what we need to deal with it. I do like those kind of movies too. I'm not, I'm fine with a preachy movie every now and then, but what makes his movies better and separates them from those are like you just get all these questions after you see them, like, whoa, like
Totally.
the answer is not necessarily in the text, but the text is asking questions and it's on you to like have that
Totally.
exercise and try to think about what you want. I love that I'm mentally
Totally.
stimulated after I see each one of his films, like thinking about all these ideas and wanting to see the movie again to see more if I can find answers in it. And I never really can, but I swear they're in there, and that
Yeah.
just makes his movie just so amazing.
Totally. And as you get older and you have more experiences in life and where you are in your life, like I was saying earlier, you bring that, and then
Yeah.
that'll make you think about them and have different answers. As a kid, like you were saying, you're attracted by the violence because it feels kind of cool. As an adult, where there's so much violence and people
Oh
doing
yeah.
bad things in the world, you sort of see that. I'm like, no, you should be put behind bars.
Right,
You should never
exactly.
be let out, actually.
Right. Well,
And yeah.
I think you can rehabilitate, but that's another
Or
that's
that,
another discussion we'll have, right?
find a way. Although
Yeah.
I don't know this person is curable, but but look, they tried to cure him, it didn't work. It became bad. So
Right.
there's that.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, the book, which I read in high school,
Uh,
like for class, does have an ending where it's like flashes forward to him as an older man, sort of saying like, "Yeah, I was young and I was doing a lot of dumb stuff, but I'm totally reformed now, and I just sort of look back on that as an embarrassing sort of part of my past." Just sort of, the book was trying to say that, eventually you'll kind of like, save yourself, and I kind of like how Kubrick
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
do
I'm
that in the
glad
movie.
that they didn't do that.
Right. It's like more interesting. You'd be like, wait a second, like he's back to what he was before.
I
Is
think
that
that
good
would
or
ruin
bad?
the movie for me.
I agree. Yeah. No, I think that the way that he chose to change the story a little bit, which he does several times, these are adaptations, mostly like you said, of books, novels, short
Right.
stories, but he alters them a little bit. They're not exactly
No.
word for word, and I love his alterations. I find them fascinating. We'll get to some others as we
Yeah,
keep
he's
talking
so
through this.
smart, you know. Yeah. All
Okay, so
right.
that was my first love. Why don't we move on to your first love? What is yours?
Uh, just a little old movie that no one's ever heard of. 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968, directed obviously by Stanley Kubrick, written by him, based on the book by Arthur C. Clarke, starring Keir Dullea. Is that how you say his name?
I don't know.
Probably.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, Gary Lockwood, William Sylvester. Quick logline: when a mysterious artifact is uncovered on the moon, a spacecraft manned by two humans and one supercomputer is sent to Jupiter to find its origins. I mean, what can be said about this movie? We've covered it in the past on the podcast, and this was the first of his that I watched. This is the maybe the Kubrick that I've seen the most number of times in
Hmm.
various settings with like live orchestra on my iPad as well as on the biggest screen possible.
Uh-huh.
That's the other thing. His movies actually look fine and great on the iPad too, because they are made for all kinds of viewing, which is another amazing thing. You know, you would
Hmm.
think like this brilliant director would be all prissy and precious about, oh, never watch my movie on any other format except the giantest screen. But I don't think he is like that precious about that. Doesn't seem like it.
No, it's actually really interesting when they started making VHS tapes and then DVDs and people having the non-landscape televisions. He actually would wanted his films to be released in full screen on those formats. And for a long time, you couldn't get the DVDs in widescreen because he felt that the format of what you're watching it was more important and that was constructing his shot for that
Oh,
too. So yeah, I agree. He's not like, no, you must see it like this. Like, okay, well,
right.
if this is where people are watching it, I'm gonna make sure they watch it in the experience that I think
Right.
is optimal for that viewing device or whatever, you know?
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is such, I mean, what can be said about this movie? I mean, this is sort of the template of a space movie. Obviously, everything from the production design, you know, the journey that you're in and on. But I think the deeper stuff that goes with it, like every Kubrick movie, is what is now, have always been, but now even more and more prescient about kind of what it's saying about humanity, what control we want to bring, how evolution happens, what we end up creating, and how that kind of can be powerful and gets us to the next phase, but then also weaponizes
Hmm.
things against us. And oh, by the way, those weapons, because they were created by us, they pick up on our greatness, but also our worst demons, and then they become antagonistic, you know. So, but the way this movie says all that without saying any of it,
Hmm.
all the way from the beginning of man, dawn of man, to whatever happens with Hal over the course of this space adventure, is just, I mean, of course, it's in the book, but it's just so genius. Like, again, like we were saying earlier, like none of this is said out loud. It's just for you to experience and feel. And maybe this movie I could have almost put this as a wild card because this is probably the most sort of museum PC vibes movie.
Hmm.
There's barely any dialogue. It's almost a silent film, pretty much. It's
Yeah.
basically motion, activity, these dreamscapes of people moving over space and time with amazing classical music, and you can engage with it however so you want it. You know, you can engage with it just for the beauty of it, for the serenity of it. You can engage it for all its heady material. And probably of all repeat viewing movies of his, maybe this is the one that has the most kind of layers to it, I think. And we're still unpacking that, you know. And it's the brilliance of this writer to have imagined this. I mean, I can't even imagine this movie coming out in the 60s. Like,
Yeah.
this is stuff that we are experiencing now. It's mind-boggling to me that that person could write this and then Kubrick's genius to bring this to screen in the way he did. It's just absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is my masterpiece choice. So we'll
Yes.
both talk a little bit tonight on 2001. I think yeah, like for me, I was blown away. We talked about this in a previous episode actually. I think one of my the love of film episodes we did
Right.
a while back. And for me, this was the first time I realized film is art as well. And I think the more times I've seen it, I definitely still hold that to be true. And I think the things that this movie does are is why to me like film is the ultimate art form because this movie does like the has incredible edits in it and that does not exist in any other form of literature. Like it's using what the visual style of like paintings, but it's doing it in with through movement and then
Mm,
adding music, and it's like all the things that only film can do, this film does, and it does it so well. And that's mainly what it does, to your point. Like there's not a lot of dialogue, there's not really a lot of story. It's more a theme that's connecting like the three acts together. If you
yeah.
try to go in following a plot, like you're going to be very disappointed. It's more like you have to just sort of sit back and experience this and let it kind of go, go over you, and don't think too much while you're watching it. Like again, I asked a lot of questions where at the end of the movie, I'm like, oh my God, what do all these things mean? And that's another thing too. Like I did not understand this movie at all when I first saw it, but I
Oh yeah,
loved it.
same.
And I still, the more years that have gone by, the more times I've seen it, I can construct the plot a little bit better. But that does kind of takes away sometimes of the allure, I think, of this. Like I don't really want to try to understand what's going on. I just want to feel it and be stimulated intellectually by these questions that you brought up. Like what is the nature of violence? What is the nature of evolution? Are those two, do tools and violence always have to come together? What is being alive? Like is Hal alive at the end of the movie? He seems I love his death scene when he sort of
Yeah.
feels scared. He's like, wait a second, what are you doing? Like, don't do that. Like, what's going on? And then he's starting to gradually lose his memory as he pulls out the memory cubes. And I think that is yeah, he starts to does feel like a human being. He actually gets nervous that they're gonna just, kill him, so he kills them first. He's like, uh-oh, something's happening. And that's a human emotion, that's a human reaction. So what is he alive? Like what is life that we have then? And then I love
Right.
too the ending when we're reborn into this like ultimate star child being, whatever happens there. But I love this, which is again an optimistic ending. I feel like we've moved on to this next phase of human evolution, which is even going to be more enlightened because of whatever the aliens did, or I don't know. Again, the plot
Hopefully,
doesn't
or
really
the
matter.
cycle continues, that's the
Right.
question. But yeah, to what you were saying earlier, like with a lot of other directors who've made like amazing, sort of vibe movies and such, they still sort of feel like to me a little bit like homework. Like you have to
Mm,
show up to them. And sure, you have to show up to this movie, but the genius I think of Stanley Kubrick is that even when he's dealing with heady material where there's not much plot or whatever, the movie is never boring. The movie
right.
is never, it doesn't feel like that, oh my gosh, if I don't sit up, what's going to happen, or I have to somehow convince myself to be here. No, you're here no matter what. So, and there's almost grace in that. There's almost like, because I know Kubrick probably gets accused of being pretentious, but
Hmm.
there's almost a lack of pretension in that way because, yeah, you can meet me at whatever level you want to, actually, and ultimately, this is still an entertainment art form, even though it might be much deeper. So I love that. The other thing I noticed in this watch of, I mean, we talked about The Shining, so I had that in my head, but I
Yeah.
found this movie way scarier, like
Mm,
with the sound design and these ominous things that are showing up and that whatever the
right.
sound, the singing or
Yeah.
whatever it is in the background from the very beginning. And I think I was thinking about that. Why am I more scared of this right now? I think
Mm,
because of maybe it's because of the fact that we are living in the age of AI and suddenly all this is sort of real. Like we are
hmm.
experiencing this. Like until 10 years ago or 8 years ago, these were still sort of things in the future. You couldn't really wrap your head around it. So because it's more real, the ominous nature of what could it be, but also the excitement of it, I think you can taste it, and maybe that's what makes it eerier and scarier. I don't know. I was in a different headspace watching this movie this time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in this movie that have always been kind of creepy to me. I mean, that whole Dawn of
Yeah,
Man sequence, just the way that it's
very,
shot was
yeah.
so incredible. And the actors
Oh,
playing the apes, I still don't really know how they did that. I mean, it looks
amazing.
to me real, but there, it is very creepy. And then the towards the end of the movie, during like the Stargate sequence, or even the very end too, when he's in you know, that room, right, the white room, it's super creepy. So yeah, I can understand why it would be scary. And then it juxtaposed against the Blue Danube sort of docking space sequence is one of my favorite scenes in any movie
Oh,
of all. It's just so beautiful, and how he can make, you know, technology, which is something that is so cold usually and emotionless, but using the music and the beauty of how the spaceships are traveling and moving and the way the camera is moving around them, it's bringing like emotion and heart to something that is cold and does not have a soul,
totally.
but you feel like these ships are just sort of alive. There's like more humanity actually in the ships in that sequence than a lot of the humans in this movie, who seem very just they're just like vessels. You don't really connect with them. Even during the final sort of third of the movie when they're on the spacecraft, and Hal feels more human and you sort of relate to him more than you do the humans on the ship. Or at least I do. I'm like, oh, Hal's got like a personality. He's kind of cool. These guys, like, I don't really even really know their names. And yeah, like the backstory, they give a little bit of stuff where they're talking to their family, but I don't feel connected to them in the way that I do with Hal, which is sort of weird. Then I'm like, is that the point? Or like, am I weird and not thinking the humans are they're more robotic actually? And Hal, he seems kind of cool even though he's killing people, but you know.
Yeah. I think there's a commentary on that, and I was thinking about this that first of all, you've cast the two most beautiful men, especially Kier,
Oh, you think
in
so?
I think so. I mean,
Oh, I
they're
never thought
like the
about that.
picture perfect kind of, cutout of like tall and blue eyes, and they're absolutely beautiful. But like you said, they're sort of soulless. And it made me think of, I think it's a commentary a little bit that this is the world that man has now created, where because this whole, how do I put this? This whole desire to make our lives easier
Hmm.
and have all the drudgery and the work, quote unquote, be handled by, machines or whatever. I guess the purpose of that, when you're doing it, feels like, oh, we'll have time back to do more creative things,
Be more human. Right.
be more human. But I always come back to the fact that the drudgery is a huge part of being human, failing,
Right.
lugging. We've been doing this from lugging firewood to, cleaning our own homes to
Hmm.
going and getting groceries. Like these are all mundane tasks, but they also make us human. In this society, they look beautiful, they're fit. He has
Hmm.
all the time before, bad things start to happen. He's not interested in listening to his parents' birthday message at
Right.
all. It's just
Hmm.
sort of happening, whatever. He's sort of sketching people because you have free time. So, again, I was thinking, oh, you'll have time to create and have art, art pursuits. But there's no joy in any of that.
Right.
They
Right.
look perfect, but they're empty absolutely because the conflict and the task and the doing has sort of been stripped out completely in a weird way to your
Hmm.
point because all the doing is being done by Hal. He's the one running the ship. He's the
Yeah, he
one
is.
controlling everything and paying attention. So by virtue of that, he has become more human. So it's still
Hmm.
amazing commentary, and it's so prescient right now, I think. And that made me even more eerie. I'm like, no, I actually want to go and get my own groceries. I want to do things on my own. I don't want other machines to do this for me. I mean, within reason, of course, Yeah.
Right. No, that's a really good point. Machines are just even other people, right? Like the more you get detached from that, the drudgery of life, I think you lose your humanity. And yet that is, I think that's a really good point, especially around the art. Because yeah, like the art that he's drawing is not something imaginative. It's not some impressionistic or full of his emotion about what it feels to miss his family or to be in space. It's literally just still life. Oh, I see this guy sleeping over here. I'm just gonna draw him. Like, which is very non human,
It's
right?
sterile. Even there's no
Very
joy in
sterile.
food. You're eating all, mushy, mashed, whatever, pureed stuff. Like there's no joy in any of that, even though it all looks so pristine and cool.
Hmm.
But there's no joy in any of this, actually.
No, not at all. And the movie actually there doesn't the only scenes on Earth are the scenes before we invent tools.
Mm,
And then once we invent tools and technology, then immediately we're now detached from the planet actually, and we're
right.
not where there's no other scenes of it. All the humans are just in space on these really sterile spacecrafts, and that's why I kind of see the ending as some uplifting thing where now we've been reborn as this new type of human, and we're returning now to the Earth, and we can be part of nature again because we've used technology slash tools to detach from that and become this cold thing where now the technology is has the heart to it. Which, yeah, it's interesting point about the drudgery thing. Maybe I should be more happy when I'm like, oh, I have to do this work again. Well, it's better than, not being a human, I guess. And the other thing that I noticed on this watch too, because I've seen this movie dozens of times, it might be my favorite movie of all time on any given day. It's like this or Ghostbusters. But there's a
What a
there
chasm.
I know. There's yeah, exactly. Yeah, kind of the same film. How his mise en scène always goes and kind of reflects sort of the themes of the movies. And in this movie, there's like everything is like circular. There are all these circles, and I think I was like, oh, this is sort of again like the circular narrative where the humans leave Earth and they come back, and we're being reborn as this new thing. And evolution is basically just like an endless circle. So I noticed that this first time too. This because he doesn't usually use the same visual motifs in all of his films. There's tracking shots that he likes, but it's not like his
Hmm.
sets all look the same or he's doing a lot of it's like he's doing a lot of different things because every time he approaches a new project, it's some new thing he's trying to say about this topic, and he's doing it with a new visual style. So this on this view, and I noticed all these circular images. I was like, oh, this is probably maybe what that means. Because again, just any other reason why you gotta watch movies a lot of times. I think
Totally agree.
especially
Yeah.
good ones like this, you wanna keep rewatching. If you watch this, like if folks haven't seen it and they watch it and they don't understand it, again, that's not really the point. And just come back to it. If you don't like it the first time, maybe later in life it'll open up to you and you'll realize, oh my gosh, this is just one of the
Yeah.
greatest works of art I think that humans have done so far in any medium. I think this really does stand up. With yeah, of all of human achievements. This movie is just incredible. I love it.
I totally agree. I mean, they ask these questions, right? Like if like a foreign planet or whatever came to Earth, and what would be, the goodies box you would prepare for them to
Hmm.
understand who we are and what we've achieved and what we're capable of, the good and the bad. This disc or whatever media form we watch things in that
Yeah.
time period will be in there for sure. I think it's just such a amazing work of art. And I want to say, like what you were saying earlier, even if you don't understand it, there is some deep feeling that this movie conjures up in you with the images and the music. And to your point, like this is why like film is such a amazing art form, and this movie completely utilizes all of that, at least from like a motion sound standpoint, that you can't leave the movie without feeling moved by it somehow. I don't know.
Hmm.
I always felt that even when I didn't understand it when I was younger, I still felt very moved by it. So again, not cold in
Right.
my
No,
mind, you know?
exactly. Yeah, you will feel something different, I think, from each of his films. But that's a really good point. They are kind of yeah, like meditative in a way,
Yeah.
where it puts you in different moods, and maybe in The Shining, that mood is like fear and anxiety, which I do feel when I watch the movie and afterwards. And this movie, I don't know, I do get a sense of beauty and
And dread.
optimism in this. Well, there's some dread too. Yes, no, there are definitely some scary stuff in here, but I don't know. I just the ending of from the Stargate sequence onward, I'm just like wrapped in awe of just like what I'm watching, and it's just so incredible. Like what a film. And to your point too, like I've seen this on my TV. It's great. And then also in 70 millimeter on giant screens, it's great. It's like great in every form,
Yeah.
which I think is so important. But if you try to see it in a theater, you should try to see it in a theater. If you can see it in a
Oh,
theater,
yeah.
definitely try to see it in a theater. But I love it.
I totally agree. All right.
Oh,
So I guess it's my
that's
masterpiece
correct.
next, since this was your masterpiece as well. So my masterpiece is going back a little bit in time. It's Paths to Glory from 1957, directed, of course, by Stanley Kubrick, starring Kirk Douglas, Ralph Meeker, Adolph Menjou. Quick logline: a colonel defends three of his soldiers in a court-martial after they abandon a suicidal attack. So we covered this movie before, I think on our war
That's
episode,
correct.
probably a year or two ago. That's the first time I'd seen this movie. I'd
Hmm.
obviously heard of it, touted as one of the best war movies, probably the best anti-war movie ever made. And I don't know, watching this movie again this time, I've only seen it twice. It just stuck with me even more deeply. And here's why. Of course, all the Kubrickian things are here, right? Like the mise-en-scène, the tracking shots
Oh
that
yeah.
drive immediacy when you're in the bunkers and the war, and how, yeah, every actor's face, depending on where they stand and who they are, is sort of focused. The music, the realism of the war, but also the splendor and glory of, and the pageantry of military and army and going to war. All of that is on display, which you would expect from a Kubrick movie. But I also think, unlike a lot of other Kubrick movies, which I said are sort of timeless, and that's obviously a compliment, meaning that they don't fit the mold of the genre that they're in.
Hmm.
This movie, despite being so anti-war, it still very much feels like a 40s war movie with this heart and emotion. And I weep every time in the very end when that
Yeah.
German girl is singing and everybody in that room is quiet, absolutely. So in some ways, it feels actually a lot more like a Hollywood movie to me, or like a movie made in the UK, like, Powell and Pressburger movie.
Right.
Because there's something very movie-like, despite this being the most anti-war movie, and the fact that it is this crisp. How long is this movie? 90 minutes or
Oh yeah,
something?
maybe just barely 90 probably. Yeah. Yeah.
Barely.
Yeah.
They're able to deliver all of this. It has no fat on it whatsoever, yet it's not cold. It's like incredibly moving, has amazing performances, especially I think this is probably, I've not seen all of Kirk Douglas's movies, but this is like probably in the top, like an incredible performance by him. Uh, so I don't know. That's why I put this as my masterpiece, because it has all the Kubrickian kind of foundation to it, but yet it's like a Hollywood picture that can
Hmm.
stand up with Casablanca or any of the other movies, which I didn't expect that from Kubrick. I don't expect that from Kubrick, and it surprised me that it has those elements in this.
Yeah, I love this film a lot too. I mean, again, we covered it in
Yeah.
our anti-war episode, or sorry, our war episode.
Yeah.
But you know, th this movie is great. That I love that you brought it in as a masterpiece too, because I do think it is one, but it's not talked about in the same way, or at least when I was growing up, it wasn't as the Doctor Strangelove, Clockwork Orange,
Right.
2001. Like those were the Kubrick 10 out of 10 films, and this movie I didn't even really heard of for a while, and then just like realized oh, there's this other movie that he made in the 50s, and then I rented it from the library when I was like late in high school and like watching it. I was immediately like, oh my God, this is just like insanely good. And I don't know why people aren't talking about it in the same way that they are these other films. And I think now, I think after the next like in the past 20 years, I think the movie has climbed to the acclaim that it deserves. But no, I think this is like all the stuff that Kubrick does really well, right? There's so much emotion and human spirit in this movie, and it's about sort of the coldness of these systems, and in this case, it's the military hierarchy and how it corrupts human, like the higher generals, they're bad. But not well, I guess you could say they're bad people, but they're put in these situations where those traits come out in them. In the opening scene, the head general is talking to one of the colonels, and he's like, "Oh, you have to do this impossible thing," and the guy's like, "No, my troops are all gonna die. I'm not doing this." And they're like, "Well, there could be a promotion in it for you." And then he's like, "Oh, you know what? I think they can do it." And immediately, like, he is great. Let's do it because he's incentivized by this structure that is in place, right? This military hierarchy. But it's not. It's attacking that. It's attacking war, but saying like a war is just representative of this struggle between hierarchies or classes or whatever we want to talk about, right? Where the
Hmm.
basically all that war is rich people get into an argument and they send the poor people to die to settle it. And that's kind of what this movie is saying, though it's not so much about rich and poor, more around like, the higher generals and then the lower foot soldiers. So it's just a great commentary, I think, on that, which is, again, something that Kubrick brings into a lot of his movies, like you said, the coldness of systems. So, but I think this is one of his warmer movies, actually. There's so much heart in this, and a lot of it is Michael Douglas's performance, especially in the
Yeah.
second half of the movie when it turns into a courtroom drama and how he's just pleading with the generals and sort of explaining why this makes no sense. We're killing our own troops, and and then the generals are talking about the troops. It's like, oh, these are just animals, and we need to show them as an example. And they call them cattle and all these different things of how people look down who are in higher classes down in the lower classes. And I think the movie does a really good job of capturing that. It's just such a and it's brilliantly shot.
Oh,
Like you
looks
mentioned,
absolutely immaculate.
so good, and it's those tracking shots through the trenches are just
Yeah.
so incredible. And I love the contradiction between the first tracking shot when the head general's coming through, and you can see like the grunts and the sort of the normal soldiers like sort of just are looking at him, versus when Michael Douglas's character, who's like one of the I don't really know military rank, so I can't remember what his rank is,
He's a
but
colonel.
he's a colonel. Okay, so he's more of like their commander though, and
Right.
the way that Kubrick captures their faces looking at him in reverence during those shots, because
Right.
they know like, oh, you're one of us, you're like our leader that we respect versus the leader that we don't respect and aren't really close to. I love that, and a parallel to that is towards the end of the movie when they're being led to be shot, and the camera's going by all the generals, just the way that not Michael Douglas, Kirk Douglas it's looking at him, looking at them, and just that shot to me is always just like so powerful. Like he's sort of done all he can and he feels horrible about it, but he can't show that really, and it's just so brilliant of how his head turns as the camera's moving by him. It's just yeah, Kubrick knows how to
It's
shoot, especially tracking shots. Those two shots I absolutely love in this film.
And it's very driven by emotion and humanity, again, things that I don't typically associate. That's why I was so surprised. And maybe that's why this movie didn't get, it's not talked about. I mean, now it is, but it's not, because it's not shocking you,
Right.
it feels actually much more of a conventional picture,
Hmm.
but it's been mounted with all the brilliance. But also a lot of subtlety, all these things. If this movie was really made in the 40s by Michael Curtiz or somebody else, it will be amped up. I would
Right.
still watch it and love it, but it would be amped up, versus this is laying down all the emotion in a very real way, which I think makes it all the more, powerful. The other thing is sort of, there's a hierarchy piece to it for sure, but I think I was thinking about this as you were speaking that. And Kubrick is so brilliant at this, and maybe this is a book adaptation too, probably. I
Yes,
don't
I
know.
believe it was, yeah, Booker short story.
So
Yeah.
it's in the text probably, which is that it is ultimately more about humanity. Because guess what? The guy who is amongst the underlings, who lies and is a drunk, even though he kills another person and then ends up basically putting one of that guys, the other guy who he knows is who's actually a friend,
Yeah.
his name up to
Hmm.
being court-martialed and hanged, right? So I think that element is so critical, but otherwise the story becomes a lot lesser and trite, right? That, oh yeah, the general is doing this and he wants a promotion, and so people up there are the ones who are bad and the
Hmm.
rest of us are all great. No, this is not about that. Humans are capable of the good and the bad no matter what level they're at. It obviously the consequences can be exacerbated, and maybe the ones at the top they have more power to do what they're doing, but this exists in us. And of course that guy is ultimately apologetic of what he did, but it's not like he suddenly at the end said, "Oh, take my life." No,
No. Right.
he walked
Right.
away. He didn't do that. So and then I think the final shot of being in that kind of barn or bar or whatever that is, where the German girl is singing, they're all making fun of her and such, and then suddenly everyone's quiet and sad and upset and actually crying is because it's about we're all human actually.
Hmm.
What is this war even about? And look the damage we've caused on the other side. What is this woman's role in us attacking her country? Nothing.
Right.
So that's sort of the price of it all. So I don't know, it's probably the most humanistic movie, but it's very complex in that sense that they know it's the grays in all of us actually. It's about what we choose to kind of abide by. And then Kirk Douglas sort of is the example of that, right? Like the thing that maybe makes it more like a Hollywood picture to me, other than some of the emotion of it, is that the brotherhood that you get to see. Like they
Hmm.
really revere him, and that's also so moving. It gives me chills. I come from an army background, and I've been part of these sort of big speeches by somebody, and how much love and care and brotherhood there is between the senior guys and the troops, that
Right.
can also exist, right? Like, and maybe the general who's bad now, maybe he was great earlier. I don't know. He has a giant scar on his face. So
Right.
clearly he put his life up there, right? So again, there's just so many layers, and again, the complicated nature of humanity, you know?
No, absolutely. And this time, after I've seen this movie a lot of times, after I watched it, like I do normally with Kubrick, and it sounds like you do this too. Like, went into more of a intellectual exercise of like, okay, reading things about the movies and production and other analysis. And so I was reading a book around Paths of Glory and found out for the first time that that in scene is not in the original text. And Kubrick added
Oh,
that in himself because he wanted to have a more positive, sort of uplifting ending to say that this actually isn't all bad and that we are still all human and, you know, all the different things that people can read into that scene, which I also think is the sort of this incredible bookend and gut punch of the film. But that was Kubrick that put that in there. So again, this reputation of him, I think, of being this cold and
yeah.
uncaring. And it's like, no, like he wanted this
That's
specifically in the
amazing.
movie because he wanted some ending that was more optimistic about the human experience and not like, oh, we're all terrible and these systems are corrupting us and, you know, war is bad and hierarchy is bad, etc. It's like, no, there's something optimistic he wants to say, which I thought was
Yeah,
really
I
cool.
that's amazing to hear.
Yeah, I didn't know that until
That's
this viewing.
amazing. Yeah.
And I also just when we're talking about the ending, there's also a great curtain call credits. I have to call that out. And I
Oh
love
yeah.
that they. But again, this is another reason why I think it could be used in any movie. This is a very serious war picture with a very complicated ending and well, and then they can still go into that curtain call credit. So I love that, especially because they
That's
end on the bigger star. Kirk Douglas gets the last thing, and I'm
of
like, yes,
course.
I just love this. Anyway,
Which
sorry.
feels once again like a Hollywood picture kind of moment, right?
Totally.
Which I love
Yeah.
that he's playing in that because he normally doesn't play, at least in my mind. I guess the other interpretation that I kept thinking of was that this is about war, but war militaries, they're ultimately corporations in some way,
Hmm.
and they're a stand-in for really any group that is
Right.
organizing to do anything. And I kept thinking about that, right? Like some of these things of like, okay, I'm going to do what it takes to get my promotion, or you're rewarded for actually swallowing whatever the hard things are, or your boss is saying things that are hurtful to you, but you sort of put them aside, even if you don't believe in the big vision of the company and you think the company is sort of doing wrong things or whatever, but you put that aside, you stand up, and because you got bills to pay or you have your own pride because you want it. Like
Hmm.
there's so many other things, right? You once again, it's very human. You're seeing different aspects of humanity at all levels. Like because we are also given a pat on the back for ambition, right? For
Right.
making it
Right.
actually, whatever the cost might be. In this case, of course, the cost is huge and lives, and it's not just being at a company and getting some stupid project delayed. But we're also applauded for that, right? Like do your best and climb up to the next level and what have you. So I think the movie is actually a lot more morally complex in that sense. Well, if you sign up to be in the army, right? If you don't like this, go quit, right? I mean, the job is you got to defeat the other person no matter
Mhm.
what. That's the order. So I don't know. I was thinking about that this time that, there's no easy way out here, actually. Again, with all Kubrick movies, it's always morally complex.
Right. I think this movie, yes, it is obviously a war film and it talks a lot about war and we've talked a lot about, military structure, but I really do think you're right. This movie is just using that system of hierarchy as a way to comment on all systems of hierarchy. And
Right.
maybe the military is the most strict because not only is it life and death, but there are like very specific chain of command stuff. And, it's sort of the most codified system that we have of hierarchy. So you can use that to maybe comment on hierarchies in general. But I totally agree with you. Like, it's not just sort of um, attacking or questioning military systems of hierarchy, just all in general. Like, why, what are these systems really doing to us? And maybe the way out of it is get rid of hierarchies. But
Yeah,
that's
or no war or whatever, because you
what
could
I
you could
mean.
say
Yeah,
from some angle that Kirk Douglas is a bad colonel. He shouldn't be ruling this thing because guess what? He prioritized something else over actually defeating the enemy, which is the order of the day.
right. No, that's
And
yeah.
that
He
would be a
just
perfectly fine interpretation if somebody has that.
right.
So
Right. And
Yeah,
then they could have definitely put him. I mean, at one point he does say, "Take me," right?
take me. Yeah,
But they're like, well, this isn't really about what actually happened. We're trying to, keep the grunts in line, and we need to use set them as an example. But no, you're totally right. There's a lot of different ways to read like Kirk Douglas's actions in this film because yeah, he does not order the second charge after the first is defeated, and he was told to do it. He's insubordination, and that is also something you can't do in a
insubordination,
hierarchy.
weak. Probably you don't even want the promotion. Weak.
Right.
You shouldn't be
Exactly.
here.
Right.
So, and
Right.
I've definitely questioned a lot of these things in my entire career. Should I be fighting for this? Do I even care? Do I even want it? Oh, but I do want it. No, or if I
Mhm.
don't want it, maybe they'll think I'm bad. Yes.
You're right. It's all systems, right? And that I think is
Yeah, but we
that's
made those. I also
true.
am very
No,
much ownership of like, no, this is also about me. I can't put it on the system either. If you don't want it, go do something else, but you're staying in it, right? So you
right, but these
must,
are yeah, these are human created systems too, which is why I am optimistic that if we created them, and if we don't like them, we can change them because these are not some innate thing that has always existed forever and it's in our DNA or whatever. It's
totally.
like, no, this is all invented by us for some purpose that works sometimes and other times it doesn't. And this movie to me, I do think a lot about that I think of it more in the class lens just because that's the lens that I look at a lot of different things. And that's why this movie, when I first saw it, was so powerful to me. I was like, oh wow, like war is just class war extension, and yeah, but it is, yeah. There's more things going on here in this movie that just a war picture. Yes, it is a war picture, but there's so
Yeah,
much more, and that's Kubrick, right? Like this conversation we're having now about systems and change in your work life and all this stuff. It's like this is movie spurred on, right? It gets you thinking, which
exactly.
is what I
It's
love about
amazing.
his films. You think after you finish watching them, and you feel
It's
too,
amazing.
but you're thinking as
Yeah.
well. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And, on the systems thing, ultimately they're creations of us. And I think we are flawed, right? So the systems we'll make, they may be made with good intentions, but then our own thing makes them something else, and some of it works, and we take them down. And then, but some, in some way, the systems are also an extension of who we are as humans, which are flawed. We are
Right.
flawed. So,
And now you sound like Hal, right? Well, human
right.
error, then the humans must be gone, so then all error can get erased. But that's cool. I liked Hal, like I said.
I can still read your lips, David.
Uh, nice.
All right. Do we want to move to your wild card?
Yeah, let's get to our wild cards.
Okay.
So my wild card actually relates to your film because it's also another movie with Kirk Douglas. This is Spartacus from 1960. This is a film obviously directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, and Tony Curtis. And the IMDb plot summary: the slave Spartacus survives brutal training as a gladiator and leads a violent revolt against the not decent, decadent, big difference, decadent Roman Republic as the ambitious Crassus seeks to gain power by crushing the uprising. Yeah, I was like, what did Crassus write this thing? What do you mean, decent Roman Empire? Anyway, a Roman Republic. So this is my wild card for Stanley Kubrick, and the reason why I consider this a very interesting work in his filmography is that it is the only time he has worked like within the studio system where he couldn't fully control everything. Like Kirk Douglas brought him onto this project because of the success that they had with Paths of Glory, and he respected him a lot, but Kirk Douglas was like a huge star back then, and it was more his movie than Stanley's, and they fought a lot on the set, and a lot of compromises were made, and this is the only time actually that Kubrick has ever not had the final say on every single thing that is in a film. So it's very interesting from that point to see him struggle with people saying no to him in other artistic visions that are clashing with his, which is not anything that has ever happened in any of his other pictures, and he was only 30 at the time too. Like he's very, very young. Had, just Paths of Glory was his only kind of major success, but he's still able to deliver a film within those confines, but one that still feels like a Kubrick film in many scenes, in many ways, and is still an incredible film that I really like a lot. And he does inject, I think, elements of humanity into this movie that I don't know would have. I mean, I can't say if maybe this was in the script, so maybe I'm
Mhm.
talking a little out of turn, but it feels very much like Stanley Kubrick on these scenes where so there's a slave revolt. This is based on a true story. When Spartacus is freeing all these slaves and they're getting this army together to then ideally go home and go back to the countries that these slaves came from. And in a lot of these scenes, they're showing the families that are in the slave revolt, faces of like little kids or old people, and you get a sense of like, wow, these are real people. These aren't just like slaves or a story element, or it's all just about Spartacus. It's constantly reminding you of the humanity that and the conditions that these slaves were under, that these are humans too, and that why they wanted freedom so badly because they had dreams, they had lives, they had kids, they had relationships and everything. These aren't just yeah, like tools for the people that own them. And those scenes always are so captivating to me. And he doesn't do a lot of it. Like, he doesn't focus too much. It's not like we're following one slave family throughout the film. It focuses, yes, a lot on Spartacus, but every so often it'll show anytime there's a big scene of the slaves marching, he always shows the kids and the old people and the families. And I just think that is his personality and his focus on the humanity coming through. But yeah, I also say too that I've only ever seen the director's cut of this movie, which was restored in the 90s, back to what Kubrick, more like what he wanted. They inserted some scenes in that were taken out by censors. And also, and I did some more research and after I saw this film too, that the end of the film was not meant to end with a giant battle scene, and that's something Kubrick fought for and got
Mm.
done. And I think that also adds so much more to the story because it's what you
Mhm.
expect in an epic spectacle. You want to see some epic battle. So I'm glad that he was able to at least fight for that. But that's another just element that he is adding positive things to this movie, even though fighting against the star and the studio system and all the troubles that he
The
had.
cinematographer apparently it
Yeah.
was rough.
Right. And I mean, yeah, exactly. Very rough, but he was still able to tell like a great tale. And I do really like this movie. And I love epic films set in antiquity. And this one, I think, really stands up because of these modern themes, which we'll get into. We get more into the film. But that's why, for me, this is my wild card. And what are your thoughts on Spartacus?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most kind of wild cards of wild cards for him for all the reasons you said, right? Like a period movie and not made by him in full control the way he
Hmm.
normally it would do. It also very much feels like a sword and sandal movie of its time. Not
Yes.
that I think I've seen Ben-Hur a long time ago. We actually did a Cleopatra watch for the first time last year. It took us
Oh,
a whole week to
I,
watch it.
I've always wanted to see that film. Is it good?
We liked it.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've heard actually good things about it. It's
It's
more just
actually
from
very good.
financial. They spent too much
Yeah.
money on it. It's not that the movie's bad, is what I heard, but
Yeah, no,
I'll have to
it's
check that out at
really
one point.
good, and you see all the money spent on the screen,
Love it. Yeah.
so it's all worth it. Um, so, so yeah, I mean, this was my first time watching this movie, though, which, yeah, I mean, I catch myself by surprise that Kubrick directed this movie because I just would never associate this with him in my head. But I really enjoyed it. I think it has, like you said, a lot of the Kubrickian elements, obviously, I mean, that battle scene with those like rectangle kind of spaces of all these troops
Yeah.
moving and then those fire logs being
Hmm.
shelled at them. Like those are some incredible sequences which I would expect from Kubrick, right? Like you are completely transported and it feels as real as possible from a scale standpoint, all of it, which is true of a lot of the period epic movies of that time. But I think all of them, they have sort of like a fake veneer to them a little bit, because of special effects or whatever, versus this one, at least the battle scenes, they feel really real. And you can see where Ridley gets it from, right?
Absolutely.
Like this is
Yeah.
all coming from there. And dare I say, of course, Ridley's making these movies, much, much after in time, maybe does it better actually, because I think the visceral nature of his battle scenes, with the spectacle and the epicness and the scale, but they're just a lot more visceral.
Hmm.
They feel a lot more immediate. Like we just covered Last Duel on the last episode, and so it's fun to see that like somebody has taken a page from their teacher and their master and maybe done it even better, in my opinion, actually. But coming back to Spartacus, yeah, it definitely feels like an epic from that time, I would
Hmm.
say, which I personally love. But there are these Kubrickian flourishes. I think what the movie maybe lacks, for a lack of a better word, is in those big epic movies of that time, typically the central performance of the main person will be heightened to
Hmm.
match the epic scale of the rest of what's going on. And some of it is just in this character, right? Like this is a very silent, muted character that you don't really get a whole lot of his inner monologue, his struggles. Why are people following him actually? How did he emerge to be this leader that he does? There are some moments, like the moment in the tent with the guy who's, I think, where he says that, we have nothing to lose because ultimately death would mean freedom. There are like amazing scenes like that that really
Yeah.
show his psychology and why people admire him. But I almost feel like this is more of a Kubrickian hero, which feels a little bit misplaced in my mind in the whole big giant movie, because I needed a little bit more just to understand why is it that people are following you,
Hmm.
only because the movie's epic scale is pitched here, so you expect that versus Kirk Douglas is giving a very understated performance the way he would,
Right.
in a Kubrick movie, actually. So there's some like tension there, I guess, and that's sort of what holds it back to me for me a little bit. And the movie obviously takes its time and such, which is fine. I'm all in for a long movie, right? Especially
Oh
when you
yeah.
have beautiful settings and setups. So yeah, that's what maybe held me back. And of course, all of Verenia's glam makeup, who looks amazing even as a slave. I'm like, oh, okay, this is clearly a studio note that Kubrick couldn't fight back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely do think this is a flawed film and it's not perfect, but there are enough moments for me of
Yeah,
just brilliance, especially in the beginning. I think the first act, which is
which he
essentially
didn't direct
Gladiator.
actually, right?
Right. Well, the first scenes he did not direct. That was the first director who was fired on
Yeah,
set when they're in the rock quarries. But the rest of
right.
the gladiatorial piece, which
That's my
again,
favorite part, actually. I
me
totally
too.
agree.
That is the most interesting, fun. Like Peter Ustinov is just so great as
So
like
great.
the gladiator training guy, so funny and just very cool scenes. And I love when that the gladiator decides not to kill Kirk Douglas and is trying to go up there and kill the Romans, then gets killed. That whole
That
scene is just
actor who's an athlete, I think, in real life,
so
right? Like,
cool.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. Like, steel face and so much behind those eyes. And it's a silent picture, actually, that first act, at least from
Hmm.
the gladiator's point of view. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Right, which I think is so great. But yeah, I do think the movie is maybe a little long, and you're right in that it's not a exploration about why Spartacus did this and what drives him, other than just, you obviously you're a slave, you want to be free, but why is he this lightning rod with all the rest of the slaves during one of the most famous slave revolts in the Roman times? And I think they're choosing to focus more on some more conventional Hollywood sort of stuff. It's not
That's
really
the
like
thing.
a exploration of a character. So that's where I think the movie could have been more interesting, perhaps. But I still just the epic scale of this with the intermission and the overture and the Saul Bass opening credits and
Oh, amazing.
just so cool. And obviously the I am Spartacus scene at the end of the film too, I still just think is super powerful. One of the
Yeah.
obviously an iconic line that is still said nowadays, even though people might not even know what it's from. I think that whole sequence is amazing. And then also the end of this movie too, which obviously is a downer ending in the sense of Spartacus is dead. But I do love that there is that bit of optimism that they put in here where he gets to see his child who, because he
Hmm.
mentions early in the movie, like he was a slave, his father was a slave, his grandfather was a slave. So like from the
And he's
lineage of
free now.
slavery, and finally it's broken and his kid is now
Yeah.
free and the
Yeah.
sacrifice that he made and, the whole thing around thinking about what's some line about, you have to sometimes plant the seeds of a tree you'll never sit under, sort of thing. Like
Right,
Spartacus
right.
sacrificed himself to, yeah, his slave revolt failed, but his son was free. And then obviously now, there's no slavery in Italy. So eventually he got what he wanted. But I just love that very optimistic,
It's
positive
very
ending on it.
moving.
It
Yeah.
totally is. I think that whole last like 15, 20 minutes of the movie I also really like as well when they just find out that is Spartacus, and then
Yeah.
they crucify him. But just that stuff, the themes of this movie around solidarity and rebellion and freedom always really speak to me a lot. So I still love the film, but
Yeah.
it is definitely not perfect, and you can tell Kubrick struggling within the confines of this. And after this, he never worked in the studio system ever again,
Yeah.
and is like, I'm never doing this. I'm going back to doing everything in my way, and then delivers a bunch of masterpieces after this.
Totally. But still, in its genre, I would put this in like the top five of sword and sandal,
Hmm.
epic movies made from
Yeah.
any time actually, because of the scale. And also like you're talking about the lives of other people, common people, children and such. I think that texture is so brilliant. Like you don't often get that in movies like this.
Mm-mm.
And then the other piece that we haven't really touched on is the amazing human interactions. This movie is a very talky movie, actually, which you
Very
don't
much.
really expect. There are people in Roman courts and stuff that's happening between Laurence Olivier's character, how he's scheming, whole scene in the baths between him and Tony Curtis
Yeah.
and whatever is going on over there. The Tony Curtis, like those like fables or songs that he's singing and how people are enchanted by those. There's also a lot of laughter in the movie, like
Hmm.
the love and the romance between Verenia and Spartacus, like how that is sort of a silent thing, but then it blooms over time. Like all that is handled so beautifully, actually. It's very moving. And then what's the main actor? Charles Lawton, is that his name?
Yeah, Charles Laughton is in this.
Yeah, like he's another scene stealer, obviously. And a lot of the psychology of the movie is actually there, right? This person who seems to be righteous at the same time is, has his own harem and is looking out for himself. He's obviously
Yeah.
very corrupt at the same time. I think that's such a amazing central performance. And then the biggest arc of the movie actually is in Peter Ustinov's character, and that's why he
Yes.
wins an Oscar for this movie, which I'm very happy that he has an Oscar. He probably defeated some other more deserving people. I don't know, but I'm very happy that he has it because he gets an amazing arc in this movie, actually. Very sort of sleazy in the beginning, would put the show, and it's
Hmm.
even a little bit like, oh, can't even hold the umbrella right as he's like walking
I
up with
love
the
it.
slaves. I
He's
love
so
those
good.
touches. And
Yeah.
then by the end, he's definitely is a different person because he's been through a lot. So yeah, this movie, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, like often these kind of epic movies, they don't have much of kind of head or heart to them. This one actually has a lot of that because it's mostly a talking picture,
Hmm.
which is why I miss just a little bit more depth. Doesn't have to be
Mm.
loud speeches. It
Hmm.
can be something else in the key Spartacus character, which would just make this, I think, a masterpiece, even if Kubrick didn't feel like. And I think I've read some of Kubrick himself also said that he wasn't super happy with Kirk Douglas's character arc and not performance, but like the way that character comes to life in the movie. That's his gripe as well with the movie.
Yeah, I think that he was fighting, from what I read too, like a lot just against Kirk Douglas as the star who gets to make his own decisions for what's best for him in that role and less
Right.
about the movie overall. And it's just interesting that they had such a great relationship on Paths of Glory, which was talked about so much so that Kirk is like, you should direct this, come in and, we're firing the current director, you come in. And then after
Right.
this, like they had a very sour experience and then never worked together again. And I don't think ended on good terms. So it's just interesting. But no, I think this movie is it's an epic, but to your point, it's an epic about human stories, very smaller
Hmm.
human relationships, which is something that is very rare. And the scenes that we're talking about, a lot of the highlights, even though we did talk about, the battle, but they're all the human elements. And it's not about the grand scale of all these other things. I think they're doing a brilliant job, which, you can give up to the screenplay as well, in doing
Or
that. But
Trumbo.
yeah, by Trumbo, right? Great screenwriter. But I do think a lot of this is just Kubrick trying to bring the humanity, which he does
Right.
so well, into this picture, which just is not usually done in these backbits. They just focus on the scale
The
and
bigness,
the
exactly.
bigness, and that it's not about the small things. And Kubrick focused on the small things here, which is why I think this movie is unique and stands out.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you get a lot of bigness in Cleopatra, and you definitely miss whole chunks of things, even though the movie is like 8 hours long. I still loved it. I mean, she has to say at least 30 times in the movie that she's from Egypt. So there's that, in case you forget. But I love that gag. Now, in my household, we often say, oh, where are you from? Egypt.
Well, technically she's Greek, but that's another discussion we can
True.
have when we
It's another
cover that
discussion. Yeah.
movie. But great. So let's move on to your wild card. What do you have for us as the final Kubrick movie we're covering today?
Okay, so I guess this is the real Kubrick period movie, which is Barry Lyndon from 1975, directed, of course, by Stanley Kubrick, starring Ryan O'Neal, Marissa Branson, Patrick McGee. Quick logline: an Irish rogue wins the heart of a rich widow and assumes her dead husband's aristocratic position in 18th century England. That doesn't really fully capture the movie, but yeah, that's one part of it. Sure.
Right.
Um, I'd never seen this movie, and I daringly put this as a wild card before I'd even watched the movie because I just felt in just listening about the movie, watching stills and such. This just feels different in its
Hmm.
pacing. Not that just because it's a spirited movie, but obviously I knew about how it was shot and candlelight and real light, all of that. I knew about all of that, but it just felt different to me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I put this as my wild card. Do I really believe in that? Would I have to change this after I watched the movie? And then I watched the movie and like, oh yeah, I think I made the right choice. Because this is what a movie this is. I almost put this as my masterpiece for him. I mean, that's the thing. These are all
I
masterpieces.
know. I know.
So
It's so
what do
hard.
you do? It's just so hard. But
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like this movie. I think I'll say why it's a wild card for me because I think it's, of course, it has all the Kubrickian, detail, orientedness, and amazing compositions. Absolutely painterly, even more so in this. Like every frame of this movie is painterly from an
Incredible.
actual
Yeah.
picture. But I think what makes it a wild card for me is, oh, I should say, once again, a huge deep commentary about humanity and who we
Oh,
are as a
absolutely.
people. And
Yeah.
I mean, this is a period movie, but it feels super relevant. It's timeless to me because this is who we are as human
Hmm.
beings,
Hmm.
how silly we are, how stupid we are, and also
Yep.
how great we are at times. And also, we know nothing, we have no control over anything.
Yep. Yeah,
So there's
exactly.
that. We
Yep.
end up where we started. So there's that.
Yep.
But I think the wild cardness of it to me is it has like a romance to it. I'm not even talking about the romance between the characters, but I think this is the most romantic and
Mm.
probably the funniest, even more funny to me than Doctor Strangelove.
Mm.
And that's sort of why I put this, because I think this movie, with its kind of distance narrative quality, kind of almost presents it like a picture book sort of thing where someone is calling out all the dumb things that are happening, and the reason you laugh is because you're sort of like, yeah, I might do that too, or maybe
Hmm.
I might have done that. And that's like, he's so in on the joke, of this movie and who we are as humans. And we've seen all humanistic impressions, violence and sex and greed and power and all of that. I think this to me is probably the most commonplace humanity of our day-to-day living. That's what this brings. Of course, there are bigger themes of sort of ambition and greed and all of that as well, and how self-destructive we can be. There's all that at play, but there's the humor and the romance of it that makes it a bit of a wild card for me. I don't know.
Yeah, so for me, I obviously the film is incredible, and this much like Paths of Glory though was one that I came to a little later in the '90s when the Kubrick films first came out in a box set by Warner Brothers in this white box set. It was like the white DVD set, and it had like 2001 and The Shining and Clockwork Orange, all these movies I knew and loved, and then there was like Barry Lyndon in there, which I was like, okay, haven't really heard about this one as much. I looked at the runtime. Oh my God, it's 3 hours. And I don't know, like I'll just like keep rewatching The Shining and Clockwork Orange. So I sort of like came to this one like one day I will carve out the afternoon and sit down and like watch Barry Lyndon. And I remember doing that for the first time in right after college. So even I waited a long time to finally do that, and I really liked it. Didn't love it, but now every time I've seen it since then, it's like quickly shooting up like my Kubrick rankings and just movies of all time. I just think it is so incredibly like powerful, but very subtle in what it's doing. And that you're right, this is really the his sort of grand treatise on just the human experience and following this character who's like such a little shit through most of this and just seeing
But
the
also
trials.
very human
No,
in my
that's what I
mind.
mean. Yeah, that
Yeah,
means I'm like, okay, well, this guy is like just working off of base human emotions and all these different things. And, the grand statement that it really is saying that we are trapped in fate and there's nothing we can do really to make any meaningful change with us or in our lives because these things are just going to happen to us. And as much as we want to control stuff, you really can't because fate and happenstance and chance are really what runs your life. And which
totally.
is so incredible. And how then he's also able to do visually sort of state that in this just I mean one of the most beautiful movies if not the most beautiful movie ever shot where there'll just be scenes where Barry's like sitting on this chair and the camera like slowly pans out and like nothing it's like for 4 or 5 6 seconds and then it just focus on this wide shot as if it's like a painting. You're just looking at an
Yeah.
actual like, painting from that time in the same way that, you sort of feel like your life is sort of trapped in a painting. It's already been painted. There's really not much you can do. You just sort of sit there and just like enjoy or don't enjoy it, but there's not a lot of agency you're really gonna have. And every time he does that in this movie, I just am in
Yeah.
awe of like, whoa, like this, it literally is like every frame in this movie is a painting purposefully a painting. And I think that fits in with the
Totally.
theme of, yeah, just being trapped by fate and this, distance that we have and looking at some of these paintings and being like, oh, who were these people? I was like, oh, this is sort of what they did. And it's the same stuff we're doing. There's no difference in history. We're all just humans who have the same desires, same problems, same good things and bad things about us, deal with the same stuff. And, and then, yeah, we'll talk about the ending in a second, which is also, I think, just insanely amazing. But
So poignant. Yeah.
yeah, but I think this movie is so freaking good. Especially on this rewatch, I'm like, maybe this yeah is even better than I thought. I just love this film so much. So amazing.
Yeah, it's my first watch, and I mean, I obviously listeners would know I have a bias for like period movies and war
Hmm.
pictures. So there's no surprise, like Paths of Glory and this one are sort of in my kind of top. As much as I love the other ones too that we've discussed on this podcast, but like this was instantly, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is, and it did take me a little bit, I will say, to get used to the narrative quality of it because I sort of
Hmm.
was like, why do we have this? There's because I don't need to be told. I can watch this, I can understand what is happening, the humor of it, the irony of it. I get it. Why are we pronouncing that? But by the end of it, I think it, like we were saying earlier, it adds like this distance quality to the movie. It feels like a picture book,
Hmm.
and it also makes it extra funny. And
Oh
you're
my
sort of
gosh.
in on the joke because
Yes.
you already know what's going to happen, right? Because it tells you so that, oh, he's meeting so and so person, and this is going to be the big demise
Hmm.
of this whole thing, So it's a way to kind of put the audience on the edge of the seat a little bit because this movie gets a lot of criticism for being super slow and cold and
Mm.
distant and boring. And to me, it's far from any of those things because you're on the edge of your seat because you want to know what will happen. Maybe this is the most plot-driven movie of his too, because there's always
Absolutely.
something going on. Another reason for it to be in the wild card category in my
Right, right.
mind. But yeah, but at the same time, like all great Kubrick movies, if you don't really care about the plot, you can just, be and luxuriate in this entire world that is so richly, amazingly created. And so it's just brilliant. And a career best performance by
Ryan
Ryan
O'Neal.
O'Neal, who,
Yeah.
I mean, from what I read, like, he's not the best guy and is probably, method casting in some way, where he sort of thinks of himself as this little shed.
Yeah.
So it sort of seems like it worked out really well. But I think he's great in it because you want somebody who you sort of find pathetic and
Hmm.
you are also like, oh, Barry, you're doing this again. Why? But you also root for him. And there's a everyman quality to him at the same time. He's so beautiful in, physically in some ways,
Yeah.
especially when he's in his prime, if you will. So I don't know, it's just genius on his part and obviously Kubrick's part of kind of using him this way. Because otherwise, if this person was just making silly mistakes or was stupid, it'll become boring very quickly.
Hmm.
But I think what they find together is the humanity that he almost gets it, or
Right.
his instincts are right that no, there's a war happening. I should be out of here. Or I've seen this powdered face Irish guy. Let me bear my emotions. It's calculated and yet sincere at the
Hmm.
same time, which we often are as people. But then to what you were saying earlier, we don't really control how it ends up.
Right.
So
Right.
some of these choices are actually smart, by some account of the view, but they don't pan out.
Right.
And then once he gets it all, he just self-destructs because that's the thing. When you rise up from there, you've never really been given a solid foundation of being and being righteous and spending time learning and those values have not been inculcated in you
Hmm.
that once you get it all, you don't know where to go from there. So you start self-destructing, you start cheating, and then Guess what? Your mother then comes in and lights a fire under you, and then you totally collapse.
Right. Yeah, and I think the narration is very important with that too, because it does that
Yeah.
distance. It makes it like you then it I don't know, for me at least then I can see, well, this is just how humans are reacting, and I'm just one of these people too, and someone could
Right.
say the same thing about my life and the dumb decisions I make or the things I think are the right decision, and then nothing ever kind of pans out the way that you think. And yeah, the narration in this, which is also something in the original novel, is first person narrative. And Kubrick changed it to a third person, and I think that change
So
is
smart.
is masterful. And I agree with you about the comedy too. One of the funniest things in this movie to me is the intermission where the narrator's giving this big speech about something and the intermission just cuts him off. They're
Right.
like, just intermission, like just stop talking. Like we're just it's time for intermission. It's sort of again, it's like we're not the narration, we're not even the movie's not even taking it seriously. Like it's not some grand, narration where it's talking about, all the different things and what they mean. It's like, yeah, we're just gonna cut you off. It's time for
Yeah.
intermission. Goodbye. And it's like fades out. And it's like, wait, what? Like every time I'm like, wait, is something wrong with like the projector? Like I think that every time I see it, I sort of forget about that joke. I think
Yeah,
that
you're
is
right. I
just
did.
so
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, I think this movie is I think Doctor Strangelove is funnier, but this is like right up there. It's just so funny watching the situations and the way that Ryan O'Neal plays his character too, where you care about him, but you sort of like seeing good and bad things happening to him. Like you like when he
You want to
has something
slap
bad
him
happen.
at the same
Yeah,
time.
I'm like especially in the beginning when he's like challenging that guy for the duel for the woman that he loves, and he's like so rude at the dinner table, and then he does the big duel, and then it turns out to all be a joke too. It's like, well, we tricked you actually, so we just to get you out of here. It's like, oh, like Barry, like yeah, but
I
like
know.
you kind of deserve that in a way too. It's so funny. I love it.
It's so good. And then we should mention some of the I think the duel scene I mean the duels are a big part of this movie, right? Like
Yeah.
it kind of gets they kind of bookend every big chapter of his and kind of what he gets good at too, like in the
Yeah.
middle, the second duel he's actually good and ends up getting a medal. Even though when he's getting the medal, people are saying you're lazy, you're bad, but
Mhm.
here's a medal for you. It's
I
pretty
know. I love
funny.
that.
But then the last one with Lord Billington is kind of incredible. Again, kind of you're on the edge of your seat, but it's also you're kind of laughing out of your teeth when he fires the gun accidentally while loading
Oh,
it.
yeah.
It's just such an incredible scene. And then that all leads to the ending, which I guess we can talk about.
Yeah, yeah, I think the final sort of epilogue shot of this movie is just so amazing and so powerful. It basically says, all these people they did a bunch of stuff, but they're all, basically it's like they're all dead now and they're all
Yeah.
equal. I love that. It's like they lost. This is all in Regency times, and now they're all equal no matter what happened. And it just is sort of this stark reminder of like, oh yeah, like we just watched this guy's crazy life, but he's at some point we all die, and then we all reset back to wherever we were before this life, which is nothingness or whatever. And we're all even. And whatever all the stuff that we did, all the mistakes we made, the triumphs we had, does it really matter at all? And I don't view that in like a negative way, like life is meaningless. It more just puts it
No,
into perspective. Like this is all that we have. This is all that any of us has, because at some point we're all going back to just being equal. I just love that epilogue.
totally agree. And the adventure is worth it, no
100%.
matter what, right?
Right.
And I like the equality of it is shown, right? Like, look at all the people. The woman he marries, the countess, like, what a life yes, she's leading a life of privilege, but she was married to a super old guy who died. I mean, seemed
I love
horrible.
that. It's so funny.
She's
What do you die?
beautiful but she has no agency. She's trapped
Hmm.
in a gilded cage. She tried to kill her after her little son died, which
Yeah.
by the way is like so sad and
Yeah.
so horrible. That's the one moment where you really ache for Barry because
Totally.
like if anything, I think, wanted to be a good father. I don't think he could be anything else really in his life, but that one emotion, even though it might be from a selfish point of view that finally I have my trophy that belongs in the society so I can
Right.
tout him, there might be that going on, but it's still very sad when you see that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, she's trapped there. Lord Bullington, you sort of root for him initially because as a young kid, by the way, great child performances by both the
Oh
kids, I
yeah.
think, Brian and Lord Bullington. And Bullington is sort of, he can see something is wrong here and he really wants to protect his mother, but
Right.
then he ends up growing up to be a little shit as well.
Yep.
Can't even load a gun, looks weird
Yep.
completely. And nothing really happens to him either. And then of course, they have money, which by some accounts, I guess you kind of get the last laugh, but they're also trapped, And and I love it that her hair just keeps getting bigger and bigger as the movie goes. It's so hilarious to me. So that's another equality, right? Like he's lost his leg back in the same town with his
Yep.
mother. These are people all trapped in their beautiful gowns and big hairs, and that's that.
Yeah, it's like Barry's this things that he dealt with when he was starting out trying to become like a lord is all the same crap you deal with when you're also then a lord. It's like the
Right.
problems are either you have them and the money isn't going to make actually that much of a difference. And the people aren't that different either at the rich versus the lower
No,
class
they're the
in this movie. It's
same.
all
And
the same type of things and stuff's just going to happen to you no matter what. There's not,
yeah,
I think Barry just wanted some easy escape. Like, well, once I get become a lord, and Marion, and then I guess you're right with the kid. Yeah, once I finally have the kid, then I feel like I belong, and that obviously is very tragic when it gets taken away from him. But it's all the same. So you're not freeing yourself from your problems. They're just going to be new problems you deal
right.
with, and then eventually it doesn't really matter anyway because we all, no matter what happens to us, we're all equal in the end. I just think it's
Yeah.
so
It's
it's so
such
incredible.
such a masterpiece. I mean, I can't wait to watch it the second time already. I think that after all my watches this week, this is the one which I was like, I can't wait to watch it all over again. It's just so
Yeah.
amazing.
No, because like you'll see different things in it
Right.
every single time, and I did too. And this is probably like I don't know the 10th time or something I've seen this movie over the last 20 years. And there's new things that I have a new appreciation for Ryan O'Neal's performance in a more so way that I didn't before. And yeah, just every time it hits me in different ways, which is again what I love about this film being so layered. I mean, also too in terms of the I mentioned that Shining trailer video earlier. This movie too has a really funny like internet sort of thing for there's like I don't know if you've seen this. It was like 20 there's a 21 Savage song that was like remixed and then put on scenes from this movie.
Oh,
It's so funny. It went viral on
okay.
Twitter maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, but I'll post these links down below in case people want to see this. But it is again just shows the power of Stanley Kubrick. This movie like wasn't a big hit at the time, not financially. It's not talked about in the same ways that 2001 or Clockwork Orange are, but still like we're making memes of this now. It just of this movie, and it's so funny too. The meme is amazing. But it's like it just shows he's still in the culture so much. So it's so
Yeah.
amazing, and his works will continue to be so. I
Oh,
think.
totally. And in the big filmmaking culture, like this is often on the list of, filmmakers making movies today, getting inspired by this. The legacy kind of lives on. Like what a master director. And I feel this sounds sort of corny to say, but it felt like a big honor to spend like week, 2 weeks just like watching all these movies, thinking about him, whatever. Of course, I'm, getting to do this much later in my life, but I'm actually happy about that I'm doing it as at a older age where hopefully I can appreciate things maybe in a different way, perhaps. But I'm also a little
Mhm.
bit envious of the fact that you had him and these movies in your lives for such a long time. So I guess there's no right way or wrong way, but I'm
No.
just I'm just very happy to have done this, and I want to now watch the other ones that I haven't watched yet, like Lolita and such at some point as well.
Yeah, I definitely of the other films we talked about most of his major works on
Yeah,
this podcast, and actually, we'll get to something coming up next in a bit. But the Killing is a film. I don't know if you've seen that one yet.
I have
It's
seen that. Yeah,
very very good.
yeah,
That I think is his first sort of like wow, this guy
yeah.
is gonna be someone who's gonna explode on the scene. But yeah, I watch his movies like multiple times, and it's all rewarding. And yeah, it's good to. It was really fun. I liked kind of going back into this and spending all this time with him over the last 2 weeks, just watching these movies and wanting to go back immediately now and watch them all again. Like once they finish, I'm like, yeah, I'll just put The Shining back on again. I actually watched half of it after I watched it in preparation for this. Immediately, like the next day, I watched about half of it because I'm like, I just need to be back in the Overlook Hotel and just feeling these things and seeing this stuff. It's just so cool. He's the best. Yeah,
That's awesome.
he's still my favorite director.
That's awesome. I guess one of the last theme that I was thinking of is that he always casts these like relatively good looking kind of men,
Yeah.
leading men. That's always like a thing, which is sort of an interesting thing. I think it's sort of showing the exterior perfection of who we can be, but yet how flawed we are as
Yep.
humans. But I noticed that he's never really made a movie that centers much on female characters. So I guess that's, I wish he had done that. That would be very interesting to see. Although I've not seen the Nicole Kidman Tom Cruise movie.
Oh, well,
So maybe there's something there. So I'll reserve my judgments, for that then.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, speaking of which, then
Right.
maybe we can transition into what we're covering next. So, in 2 weeks, we will be talking about Tom Cruise and his new Mission Impossible film, and then delving into all of our favorite Tom Cruise films. Actually, there's going to be a lot more. There would be a lot more than six if we talked about all of them. I love Tom; he's one of my
Yeah.
favorite actors of all time. But we will be talking about Eyes Wide Shut, so we'll have that discussion in two.
Spoiler alert.
Yes, well, just making sure people love Kubrick, come back, and then we
Right.
still have more Kubrick to come in the next episode, along with a lot of other great Tom Cruise movies. I'm very excited about the new Mission movie, and I
Me
could talk
too.
about Tom Cruise for a long time, so very excited to have that discussion with you as well, and be with Tom for 2 weeks after this time with Stanley.
I need you to trust me one more time.
I trust him. I trust him. So hopefully, folks will come back in 2 weeks and listen to our thoughts on Tom and Eyes Wide Shut, amongst some other films. So thank you very
Sounds
much for listening, and hope you enjoyed our discussion. Make sure to leave some comments below on your favorite Kubrick movies, or your first experience with Kubrick, or maybe another Kubrick film that we didn't cover. I'll also post the other Kubrick films we've covered on the podcast as well. So we're available on YouTube as well as other podcast platforms. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so. And also, please rate and review us, and also like the video, because that helps new listeners find our show. So with that, Karan, I will say goodbye.
See you next time. And by the way, I like snails and oysters.
Oh, interesting.
No,
We'll
I
have to talk
don't.
about that later. Bye. It was in the reign of George III that the aforementioned personages lived and quarreled. Good or bad, handsome or ugly, rich or poor, they are all equal now.